right, welcome back to the podcast. Very excited to be back in the chair again here after a few weeks. I had a two additional break in between shows. I was currently in Ukraine filming some series for Vet TV, but I'm very happy to be back in the saddle again. And today we have Keith Dow. He's a former Army MP, combat veteran of Iraq, and co-founder of Dead Reckoning Collective. A publisher of veterans stories and poems and novels, and very excited to have you on, Keith.
Hey, thanks, man. I'm glad to be here. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited to have you on. I mean, it's we've been playing back and forth, I think, for the last few months, and it's just been chaos. Like we were just talking right before we press record here. Newborns, travel, companies, it's all over the place.
This is how all good ideas happen, man. It takes a little time.
I know, right? So, so what kind of got you into? We'll just kind of start from the beginning, bro. And what got you into the Army, and what kind of started lead you down that path?
So my Army story is like not as climactic as other people's. You know, towers fell when I was a freshman in high school, and it was significant. But I was a freshman in high school, and even at that point, I wasn't like, oh, you know, this is the path I'm going on. I was doing a lot of things. I was really involved in the hardcore scene in New England, and that was like a major part of my life for a really long time. I ended up touring with a band after high school. Lived in Boston for a little bit. And then when I eventually stopped tour managing, I settled down a little bit enough to work in a bar and at a preschool. So like in a bar, a college bar, bouncing at night, and then teaching at a preschool during the day. And
that's quite the dichotomy there.
And both places love me, but at a certain point, I was working like 60 to 70 hour work weeks, tons of overtime and stuff, and making okay money and living like a cool life. But I just didn't feel like I was like moving toward anything. Two of my friends that I worked at the bar with, I say two of the friends that I worked at the bar with. One of the friends that I worked at the bar with, and one of the friends that just drank a lot at the bar, had recently gotten home. One of whom was significantly injured, and then the other had just done just as much and just came home a little bit luckier. And it was like those two were my first exposure to the GWAT. Up close and personal in terms of like someone I knew who I knew before. Coming home and telling me stories and stuff. And I was like, oh, that actually sounds like working towards something, the military sounds like something I could actually, get down with at this point. And I always say, I have kids now, and like, I always say like, I was a recruiter's worst nightmare in high school. Like there was nothing you could have said to me to have gotten me into an office. And so sometimes it's, just like college, just like a trade, just like anything, like you might not be ready for it right out of high school when you're that young. And so it was at that point that I went home. I was living with a buddy at the time, and I was like, hey, I'm thinking about enlisting. And he had been on the same track the whole day, whole week, whatever. So we went through the whole process together. I think we both wanted to talk to the Marine Corps first, and it was 2008. So their tattoo policies were null and void for us. We were already out the door. They were like, can't do it, boys. Sorry. And so we went.
I was in when that happened. And it was 2008. I remember standing in line and getting all my tattoos documented. It was nuts, but yeah.
The Army documented all my shit, but the Marine Corps said absolutely not. It was so tight right then, because it was when that whole honor guard incident happened where somebody had a neck tattoo or something, and a congressman just lost it. Was the story that I heard. And so we, both of us already having stuff like all the way down to the wrist. They were like, no. And so that was it. So we went down the hall of the Army, and then he went in as like ComSec repair, and got like a $40,000 bonus. And I got like 20 because they convinced me that being an MP would give me the best of like, job experience and other shit. And I was talking about it with my friend Adam earlier, that like it was cool, like I hated that job. I still do. I look at these kids working the gate and stuff, and I'm like, this sucks. But it like I recognize now that like I had enough cool experiences to outweigh like all the garbage. I think probably similar to anybody's military career, but particularly with me, like not enjoying that job on its own. But I had like, if I had done anything different, I wouldn't have like the experiences that I had,
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
No,
that
was pretty much it. That was how I ended up there. I just didn't feel like I had forward momentum, and then fast forward like 2008, and I was 21 when I enlisted, but I was still so dumb. Like I thought I knew a lot more. I was like, oh, these 18-year-old kids, but like I didn't know anything. I didn't even know I was going to be gone for as long as I was. Like I had no idea.
Yeah. Well, I remember seeing the guys that were older than 18, we're like, oh my God, what'd you do with your life? You're 21. And you know what I mean? And then like, I remember we had one guy, the oldest guy in our boot camp was 27. And he was in my platoon in boot camp, and I was blown away. I was like, what the hell did you do with your life? You know? And it was, he was even at his 10-year reunion, and now then you start getting older, you're like, Jesus Christ, 27, you got your whole life ahead of you. You know what I mean? Like it was funny. Even the guys in my unit, that were 22, 23, you were just like, oh my God, you're so old. What happened? What did you do? So I always find it humorous when everyone's 18 years old. Everyone seems like they're just so like, oh my God, you can drink, you can do what, and until you get back to the fleet, or even kind of into the big army, then you're like, oh, okay, that it starts to kind of settle in a little bit more. But yeah, I mean, so, and then what I think you might've mentioned, but what kind of just got you into the MP? You're just like, I'm just going to go that route. Like, if you had asked me at that time if I wanted to be like a police officer, I would have said absolutely not. So I don't really know. But they definitely pitched it as like, job, like post-service, like job translatable skills, things like that. And they're like, they're like, and you'll still deploy. And right now, like MPs are doing all of the other things. So I was like, okay, like it sounds like I'll get like the best of both worlds. And I guess like now, like I kind of am using some of the skills like that I learned doing like law enforcement, like MP shit. Cause I'm a social worker. So like interviewing skills, things like that. Paperwork, I'm real fucking good at. Yeah.
Some of it carried over. It's all what you make it, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No,
and a $20,000 bonus. So
that's sweet in the pot. Yeah. Cause I remember guys got in and they wanted to be cops. And so they're like, oh, I'm going MP, man. This is going to be great. And then not even within like a week or two, like all the MP guys were like, well, I just got fucked. They knew for the next 3.5 years, they're just screwed. They're like, well, so much for the skills of, being a cop or, wanting to be a cop after you get out of the MP, everyone's like, oh yeah, military police, it'll translate right into police force. And it was like, no, not even close.
I got to see like a pretty, like the transition and the time period that I was in. I got to see like 2008 MPs were not doing MP things. Like, the war was in full tilt. So there was no law enforcement. Like that was when every base had gate guards, like through the DOD and stuff, or they were pulling them from other MOSs or whatever. But like MPs were like used, for lots of things like downrange, and so like there wasn't a lot of emphasis on the law and order. And then I remember like, by the time I was like getting ready to go to Italy, that was when they were like, all right, we're reshaping the force. Like, and I'm like, I don't want anything to do with this shit. Like if I stay in past, I got out in 2013. I was like, if I stay past this, I'm going to reclass. Like, all the other stuff was fun to me. The law enforcement side was not enjoyable.
So what was the enjoyable part then of your 4 or 5 years in?
So like when I started, I was at Fort Lewis, and the first thing I did like my bags hit the floor, and we went to NTC with 5-2 Striker Brigade. So like immediately, like I wasn't doing, like we did some detainee stuff, but mostly like PTT and other stuff, training for Afghanistan. And then like the day that we left NTC, then we came down on orders for our whole company to go to Iraq. So like the whole NTC cycle that we had just done was like null and void. Like they were like, oh, it's going to be totally fucking different. Like whatever we're doing isn't going to be what we just did. Which like we did some PTC, some ECPs and stuff like that. But it was definitely like, it was a different environment than what we were training for. So.
Before we keep going with the podcast, I want to drop this week's discount code for 9line Apparel. We're not just a brand, we're a lifestyle that celebrates the spirit of freedom, courage, and American values. Go check out our gear, including hoodies, glassware, flags, jackets, hats, patches, and much more. All material is ethically sourced, so every shirt you buy is free of slave labor. As a veteran-owned and operated company, we also take pride in giving back to those who've served. Your purchase helps us contribute to charitable initiatives supporting veterans and first responders. This episode's discount code is DRC20. DRC20 for 20% off 9line Apparel products. I say again, DRC20, not 10, not 15, 20%, not 25 because that's a bit excessive. So get over to the store and get yourself 20% off your next purchase. While you're at it, like, listen, and subscribe to the 9line Apparel podcast for future discount codes and more conversations with amazing guests like today. Now back to the podcast. Yeah. Fort Lewis, because that's Fort Lewis McChord, right? Over in Washington State. Yeah, I've been once for the National Guard. We did one. It was my first AT out, it was my first AT at Division, and it was awesome. Like I loved it. Yeah. I was like, oh, this is really cool. I dig Washington State, you know. Yeah. And we had some ungodly hot summer too. Like it was really dry, but it was really beautiful out. I was like, it was shockingly awesome.
Yeah, I loved it there.
Yeah. So how long were you stationed there for?
So I was there from 08 to like 11, and then came down on orders because I was unaccompanied. I came down on orders for the last 2 years in Italy. So usually like Euro tours are not with any like with dependents. Like you got to have like a minimum of like 3-4 years to make it like worth the military's while. And I didn't have any at the time. So they were like, all right, 2 years is fine. Everybody, I was kind of like an anomaly. They're like, how did you get here with only 2 years left in service? And then they kept trying to get me to re-up and stuff. And I didn't end up, spoiler alert, didn't really enlist. But yeah, so that was where, and then, so the last 2 years were in Italy in a non-deployable unit. And that was that.
Dude, that sounds awesome. So I imagine that was probably a pretty good time.
Some of it, I worked a lot. It was a real fast-paced environment, and it was like super disorganized because like it was a non-deployable unit. So it was like only like admin, law enforcement shit. And the unit that I was in was under a bunch of different like support brigades and stuff until like finally like then they got under like the 18th and then had some like actual support. But like being in a unit like that and then under like transportation or like any kind of like maintenance like brigades like that didn't know. So like for a little bit we were under garrison, but like being under like units like that, they don't know what the fuck to do with anybody, right? Mm-hmm. It's so it was interesting for sure.
I mean, that's I was talking with Tyler about it. I was like, man, and we talked about before press record here, but it was like the fact that the Army still has a station like in Germany and Italy, like it's amazing. I mean, there's Hawaii. I was the luckiest Marine like of all time. Like I got stationed in Hawaii, mm-hmm. and then on top of that, got to deploy multiple times. Like, and so I got super lucky. But I mean, we don't have any other than Hawaii. That's about as exotic as it gets, you know, and, you know,
Pendleton's a pretty solid
Oh
station.
yeah, it was good. Yeah. I mean, we got off the plane and we were in Waikiki. So like you could get off the plane and then in 20, 30 minutes, you're down partying in Waikiki after your deployment to like Iraq and Afghanistan. So it was cool by all means. I loved it for that aspect. I mean, I was ready to get off the island by the end of my 4 years, but it was super cool. But the fact that like Italy, like I had gotten out, I didn't know much about the Army. And after I got out, I started finding out, oh, they get stationed in Germany, they get Italy. There's like all of like even infantry units, and I knew about them in Hawaii, and I was like, oh man, this is actually the Army's actually a pretty sweet gig.
It's pretty crazy, man. You know? Yeah, the Army has some good ones. There's some terrible ones too, and like I think Marines are lucky in that like there's only a couple, right? There's so many different duty stations in the Army, like
yeah.
But like Marines, like you're rolling a dice, and like it's a small number of like rolls that you have.
Yeah.
You know, you could luck out. Legion's not that bad.
No, it's not. My brother was stationed out there a few times, so that I got. Pendleton is actually nice, and then the only place that was my nightmare was like, do not put me in 29 Palms. And they got, you know, but some people love it though. To your point, like some people are into that desert Joshua Tree shit, and I'm just like, not for me, man. But I got so lucky because 7th Marines was pretty much like 172737. They're all stationed in 29 Palms. They had been rotating back, and my whole entire infantry class, man, you look down the roster and it was just 177, 272, 227, 33, you know, all the way through, and it was all by name. It didn't matter how good your PT was. It didn't matter how awesome you were. No one had any options to go anywhere, you know, to like, oh, maybe you're honor grad, you can shoot. No, none of it. It all came down to your last name. And there's 10 of us to 3-3, and that was it. Like it just happened to be the last of the M's and the beginning of the N. That's it. That's Nagel. Yeah, it was Montemayor, Nagel, Nelson. You know, I can still name off some of them, and Moore. And then was like, hey, you're going to 3-3. It's like, oh, okay. What the fuck's that at? You know, and we were just kind of like, that's not East or West Coast. And then we were like, well, that's not Okinawa, because Okinawa only has recon. So we were just kind of baffled for like an hour, like, where the fuck are we going? You know, and then we found out Hawaii. But yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, you can make fun. You know, you can have fun. Yeah, I guess, you know, depending on where you're at. But
yeah, we'll have to get you out to the desert, dude. We started one of my other projects with my partners. We started a writer's residency out in Joshua Tree, and we have like a panoramic view of 29. So
really? Okay,
pretty rad, man. Like as dark as the desert is, then we get that like crazy like electric haze off of the base, and when they're running exercises and stuff, there's like the nostalgic like thump thump thump, and like, you know, helicopters doing gun runs and shit. So.
No, that is pretty dope. I do dig that.
A cool spot. Yeah,
hell yeah. So what was the transition decision like? I mean, you know, why'd you jump from, you know, one, you know, like, hey, I'm getting out, fuck this, or, you know, what was that general feeling?
I think there was a bunch of fuck it for sure. I had like a whole bunch of different like plans to reclass, to reenlist, to do, you know, different things. And I think like a series of shitty leaders, and like everybody saying like, oh, your next duty station is going to be different. Oh, nothing's like this, right? Like I had 2 of those. Yeah. And they were back to back, and those were the only 2 that I had. So I was like, all right, well, if the first one, they said the next one's going to be different and it's not supposed to be like this, and then the next one is like, oh, you know, it's not supposed to be like this. Like, you know, when you get back to the line or whatever, like it'll be better. Like, and I'm like, all right, it's probably actually not going to get better. Like I'm smart enough to know that like it's probably always going to suck, and like that's okay. But I don't know like how much more I just want to like, you know, embrace the suck and just hope that like the next thing's going to be better, and have it be like another false plateau. So I started making plans to get out, and I had no idea what I wanted to do. I had like a couple, you know, short-term jobs lined up. I had a buddy that worked on a boat doing like commercial fishing and stuff. And some buddies doing like different, like, you know, contracting, like renovations and stuff like that. And I was like, oh, like, you know, I can sustain myself. And that was pretty much it. And I ended up going to school just to fill gaps, really. I worked for a little bit, and then I was like, yeah, like, let's try the school thing, because I probably never would have otherwise. Right out of high school, I was, like I said, I was a recruiter's worst nightmare, and I was probably like a college recruiter's worst nightmare too. Like, I had no intention of going back to school, but like VA benefits make it really easy.
Yes, it does.
If you know how to utilize them, which is the trick. But so that was what I did. And I found I was like really good at it, like way better than I thought I was going to be in school. And like my first semester, I made Dean's List, and I was like, oh shit. I was like, so, that's kind of like maxing a PT test. I was like, all right, well, I'm just going to, like, my goal is going to be to continue to do this, and then like, graduate with honors. Once I found out about that, I was like, all right, as long as I maintain above this, then I'll do that. And so that's what I did. And I finished a 2-year program, in like justice studies, and then, bridged into a bachelor's, of human services. Mm-hmm. And then after that, I worked in a hospital for a little bit, which was also kind of crazy, like on the security team there. And got a really good exposure into like the clinical environment, which had me, between like my body breaking down a little bit and the clinical environment kind of attracting me. I was like, oh, this may be something I want to do like more of. And so I started looking at like mental health, like master's programs. And so that was my last stint in education, was doing my master's of social work, which was, long and hard, but that's where I'm working in right now. So
what kind of, what drew you to that? I mean, like, cause I know friends that did social work. I mean, as you know, that the attrition rate's kind of high, like, so you got to be very passionate about social work. Like what kind of kept you to, what drew you to it, and what kind of keeps you driving in it?
So the first thing that I looked at, like when I started looking at like graduate programs, because I was like, I already have a bachelor's degree, so I'm not going to get like another bachelor's or a certificate. I'm going to see if I can get a master's in something. And like I looked at like masters of like counseling psychology, and found that like the credentials were like really different depending on where you were. I looked at like, masters of psychology, like again, like didn't necessarily like land you anywhere. Master of social work was the most direct thing like I saw, where like it was the same across the board, right? As long as it was accredited, like the program was accredited by the CSWE, then like it was the same thing. And there's so much you can do with it, right? You don't always have to do therapy. You don't always have to do case management. There's lots of like different little things that you can do that would enable you to like, not get bored per se. And so that was kind of the driving factor. Did it all pretty much all online, and did my field placements semi-remotely too. So I did one field placement with 107 Foundation, who I'm working with now.
Oh, nice. Okay. What years was this? Or
when I did that field placement, probably like 2019, 2020.
Oh, okay.
And then 2021, I don't know. And then the last one was 2 years ago with the New Hampshire state opioid response. So again, like super different things. 107 was a lot more like individual client contact. The opioid response was much more like big picture shit. A lot of like, legislative work, advocacy, things like that, where I was dealing with like the planning and purchasing and stuff of like naloxone and stuff like that we're seeing, and like harm reduction type stuff.
Okay.
Different sides of it for sure. But that was what drove me to it. I was like, the clinical environment looked really cool, and I was like, how do I, get into something like that versus like being a bruiser for the rest of my life until I get through. anymore.
Yeah. So, I mean, so where are you out of then doing the social work?
So I'm in Southern California now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So how is that environment? You know, like I said, my friends were working out of like Iowa, you know, so I imagine that's different. I mean, everywhere he goes is different. So even Minnesota here, you know, how's Southern California? I mean, it's just so big, like California, especially Southern California. It's massive compared to like, you know, going into Iowa or Minneapolis. You know, what's that environment like?
The last job that I had was in recovery, and I think like Southern California is more or less like the mecca for substance abuse recovery. And so there's a lot of resources here. There's also just like anything, like you know, within healthcare or anything where you're helping people, there are people who want to take advantage of that, and people who take advantage of vulnerable populations. So you see a lot of that shit, and it can get discouraging if you let it. There's also like good work to be done, you know, and then you know, working with I'm able to do like the work that I do with 107 remotely now, and so and that's really cool. A little bit different than the clinical stuff that I was doing before. Like in substance abuse, I was doing like actual therapy and stuff, and just taking a minute away from that. But yeah, I think like Southern California, there's a lot. The other thing, because I'm like gaining clinical hours for my licensed clinical social worker, I'm not doing, or I'm not seeing as many LCSWs in California. There's like a lot more like LMFTs and LPCCs.
What's that?
So like licensed marriage family therapist and licensed professional clinical counselor. And so those credentials are more popular here. I'm not sure. I think it was maybe like the billing side of things. But it's pretty cool because other than the fact that it's like really hard for me to find like a supervisor here, which is like in like when you're gaining clinical hours, is like a mentor in an official capacity that has to like sign off on the hours that you're clocking. Aside from like not being able to find those as easy, you're kind of a unicorn. So people want you, they just don't know what to do with you. You know, like the credential is desired. They just, like, they just have no idea like what you're capable of or like what you can do unless they are looking for you specifically. So,
yeah, I was going to say, cause I won't say it's a target rich environment, but like the stuff that you kind of hear out of California, especially with the amount of money they dump into homelessness, you know, addicts. I mean, then, you know, it's obviously the political stuff you see always plastered, you know, on the headlines first, you know, but I know that they have a ton of resources, but like, as you said, it's that, you know, there's good people trying to do good things. And then you have, you know, people are like, why is people in California spending billions of dollars on some other stuff? You know, you're like, ooh, yeah. We're in Minnesota. We're still somewhat, I don't know, like we feel like we pay our taxes, but we get what we want out of them. It's like right on the verge of being like, okay, you guys are going a little nuts, but it feels like we get what we want out of what we pay, which isn't a ton compared to like obviously San Diego or New York or something like that. You guys
should have kept Jesse Ventura. None of this would happen.
Yeah, right. Yeah. The body. Yeah. My dad talks about that era, which was hilarious. We have he's got a Jesse the Body Ventura doll that they like sold back in the 90s. Yeah. So he got like this doll. I don't know. It was like something that you could purchase for the campaign.
Was it the Predator one?
No, it was like him in a suit, you know. It wasn't anything wild, but
nothing cool.
Yeah, I remember growing up in that era too, though. It was ridiculous. They had like these really shitty TV movies of him, you know, and then he's the governor for like 4 years, whatever, and then that was it. They knocked him out. They're like, you're done.
He was a Mongol too. I didn't realize until like recently. Like he was a full patch like Mongol.
Yeah. There was a lot of. I mean, it was the 90s, you know. So like you can't do your research, you know. Not to dive too much into politics, but like we got the Walls clearly is like the VP nomination right now, and there's a lot of stuff about him that I knew. I was in the National Guard for about 8 years, so I served with the guys that like he basically bailed on, and you know, he was a governor, so I was like, okay, whatever. You know, I've heard of it for like the last 6-7 years, and you know, and then, about, obviously I'm sure you're tracking everything he said, and then the jump and ship. And like, I knew the guys that the sergeant majors too, at the time. So this is like a few years ago, they were like, now they're sergeant majors. And now like, so they were there when they were thick of it, AGR guys, they knew all the deals being made in those years. Cause they've just been, the active National Guard side is like, it's a small community. Everyone knows everyone's dirty secrets,
Yeah.
So I knew that before. And then when, they picked him for, my wife has no idea who he is. And I was like, that's a kind of a weird one, because they're going to find everything about, like, I was like, the same thing. I was like, this isn't the 90s where you can kind of gloss over like your Vietnam past or something. You know what I mean? Like this is like, they're going to find all of this. And they did within like 48 hours, like everything started coming out of the woodwork. And you're like, yeah. Man, like, yeah, you didn't do your homework. Like, they're going to find it.
This is a weird, like, political era where like, it used to be like, oh, good luck running for office, like years ago. Now, I don't think you don't need to care. Like, it's all on everybody's like whole shit is documented on social media.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And
I always joke, like, camera phones were what they were when we were growing up. Like, we all would have been in jail,
Yeah.
But,
yeah. Well, that was the thing too, is I remember we were part of the era of Facebook was coming. Well, MySpace was there in 2004 or 5. So was Facebook. But then Facebook opened up to the public in, I think, 2006 or something like that.
Yeah.
And I remember I came back from my first deployment and they're like, hey, my friends were like, you got to get Facebook. This is better than MySpace, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, okay, sounds good. And so I got it. But I remember we had gotten briefs back then of being like, look, whatever you post is going to be permanent out there.
Yeah.
So be careful. And so we at least came from that era. And also I told my wife, I was like, dude, we had point and shoot cameras. Like, you couldn't just take a photo and then just automatically upload it and then like regret it. Like, you had to take the photo and then you woke up hungover the next day. You would look through the photos and then you would take the best photo selects and then you would post them onto your Facebook, so you at least had like 3 buffers before you got to the point of like, is this a good idea to post, And she was like, and she's about 4 years younger than me. So she was like, I don't remember that era. I was like, yeah, you'd be in a bar or a club and you'd see flashes going off, because I was like, those were the point and shoots that everyone would bring into the bar and they would take a photo of their group or whatever. I mean, like, so, I know it's one of those weird things of like, it's like, everything's out there. They're going to find it. But yeah, back in the 90s, Jesse Ventura was like he was like a biker gang and like, no one brought it up. Like, you know what I mean? Like no one brought that up, that he was like in a biker gang.
It was fine.
Yeah. It was fine. They're like, yeah, okay, whatever, So I thought that was pretty funny. But yeah, he was kind of a wild man. I mean, he still is a wild man, but
for sure, even more of a wild man now, I think. I don't know.
Yeah. So anyways, but yeah, that's that's pretty cool. Like I said, you're seeing that kind of firsthand. So your work with Hunter 7 Foundation, we can talk a little bit about that, because I've heard a lot about them in the last few years, and I was just with some of the guys when I was in Ukraine. They're vets. I was shooting stuff for Vet TV, and I knew they're for the burn pit stuff. That's kind of like what they in the cancer, and it does, it's kind of freaking a lot of guys out. A lot of guys getting the cancer. It's like they're 33 or 35, 30, I'm right in that age range where you're like, okay, God, people are dying from cancer for like no reason, or like it's popping up and it's very aggressive. And it shouldn't be like at all. And so I know that's starting to get concerned. I was talking about the guy that I was with, Chris, and I believe he contacted Hunter 7. You guys have like blood panels or something that you can do, and then like you get registered and all this stuff. And I know I got to do that, but what's it like been working with Hunter 7 and kind of the work that they do?
So I'm just getting back into the mix. I worked with them a while back, and things have definitely changed. Got to do a couple cool like expos and stuff. But really, like, everything that you're talking about, there's definitely like the military's dirty, dude. Like we do dirty shit. The places that we live a lot of times have been around for a really long time and are slacking on repairs. Which also then opens our family members up to things. There are other places like where you're talking about in Hawaii where there's like fuel dumps and stuff. Living on ships is nasty. When you're talking about like old buildings, you're talking about like asbestos, you're talking about mold, you're talking about shitty ductwork. And then also like the actual occupational side, beyond like living conditions, water, air, things like that. Then like when you're talking about like the occupational side, then you're talking about like, we have like a huge percentage of aviators who have some really gnarly shit going on, as well as like anybody that's in special operations always has like a higher percentage, higher chance of having things going on, just by the nature of volume. They're doing a lot more with a lot more things that are exposing them to like particulate matter and stuff like that. So just being proactive. And I think that's the coolest thing that I've gotten to see is the inspiration for dudes who otherwise would like shrug it off to be proactive and like inquisitive about their own health. And so that's really like the coolest part. I mean, the blood panels and the full body scans and those kinds of things are super rad. And there's so much medical technology out there. But when it comes to like toxic exposure, I think like inspiring people to be proactive about their health, by way of like, hey, like if you don't do this, you're not going to be able to keep doing your job. And I think that's always like the fear with people who want to do that cool job forever.
I agree with you. And I think that's, cause even after I got out, like I worked out a lot. I mean, I was, I always kept in really good shape and whatnot until about my 30s. But like, even then it was cause I was contracting, I was just partying, but it was always easy to get to the gym. And that was always important to me. And now getting older, now it's almost that maintenance of like, hey man, like I got to get on the list for toxic exposure with the VA, because I was there burning shit for 7 months straight. Yeah. In our deployment, my first pump, and then as well as the other ones, burning trash. But we burnt trash and we also burnt our shit for hours on end and then dumped it. And then we kept throwing we lived right next to the burn pit. We luckily had like a concrete wall, like we were in like a whatever. I'm sure it doesn't help any, but like, it was, at least I was like in a fortress of a school, is what we took over, or what the unit prior to us took over. And then we had it, but it's still terrible. I mean, we were right next to it, the building was right next to it. Like, and so, yeah, I'm sure. And then, even the jammers, we were talking about that because again, we were in Ukraine and we're talking about the EW jammers that they're trying to use, and it's like, dude, you're just sending out crazy ass signals and it's fucking with dudes, and,
I remember, what was the Marine jamming system? Was it the Chameleon?
It was Duke, Chameleon.
Yeah.
Those are the ones I remember the most, was the Chameleon and the Duke. And I just remember the one that had like the dome on the Humvee, and you'd flip it on and the thing would just go.
That was the Chameleon. That was the active. And that was the only. So the Marine one, I remember because they sent me. I did like my company's EWO stuff, and I'm not an electrical guy, so like that was I fought tooth and nail through that course. Like I was so dumb. But like when going through it, there were two things that stuck out to me. First of all, is like Marines always get like better shit in some capacity. Like even if you guys are like scraping together, like, used like broken equipment and stuff, like it's usually still better in some capacity. When I saw the Chameleon, I was like, it's the only active jamming system that we had at the time. And I was like, that's sick. I was like, that just fucks everybody's signal up forever. Anytime that Marines are rolling through, I was like, that's badass. But the second thing that stuck out to me was definitely that like they are not really concerned with like moving things, sending out signals, being super close to us at all. I was like, I know this serves a purpose, but even at like 22 years old or whatever, I was like, this is probably not good for like long-term exposure. Like this is not good.
Yeah. And I remember doing that. We had them, and again, like our map section guys were the ones that were next to him all the time, so like I was in and out of Humvees a lot. So I didn't have exposure, like long periods. Like those guys would be patrolling for fucking, months, hours, every, like constantly. next to that jammer, so they're going to have more issues probably than I would. But even I remember being next to him and just hear that, and you're just like, Jesus,
Oh, and the man pack things too, like the
we had like a small man pack. It was like a radio size. I don't even know if it ever worked. We were always like, we got hit with a dismounted IED in our patrol, and my buddy Beaker came rolling out of the dust. And I remember him walking past me and he just goes, God damn thing doesn't work. And he's the one. And it's like, it was probably command debt, it wasn't. And you're right, Or we go on patrol sometimes and somebody's like, oh shit, I forgot to turn it on, because it'd be on someone's like back, like Molly. So they couldn't fucking know if they turned it on or, someone have to like go and like flip it on and, and they forget to do that sometimes, like, oh shit, I forgot to turn it on, But yeah, we, and a buddy of mine, when we started contracting, he worked on a CIA contract. I remember they were doing some sort of jamming and it was in a Connex box and he was like, they flipped that thing on and he was like, you could feel the heat, coming off it. And he's like, this isn't good, man. This is going to fry us, it's not good. And then there was another, one of our corpsman buddies in the Navy. He did some sort of sonar testing and he was in the water and they were shooting sonar waves at him. And so he could like feel like these like and I'm like, oh my God, dude, like I don't know what the fuck you're doing with that. But I remember him talking to us about that and how that's insane, So and I agree. I mean, now it's, chickens come home to roost or whatever, when guys are either getting sick or exposure to the burn pits. So it is cool seeing Hunter 7 because you're seeing the VA deny it. And, they're saying, I mean, my parents rode with a lot of guys from Vietnam during the GWAT years in motorcycles. They did the Patriot Guard, I think it was called. Yeah. So they would show up to like funerals and protect the funerals or just help escort. So they were doing that while I was deployed. And they ran into a lot of Vietnam guys, but then those guys started having the Agent Orange issues. And so, and there was a fight with the VA, these guys would be right next to Agent Orange the whole time. And they're fighting their claims all the way to like the day they died, and so you kind of seen that with the burn pits or whatever we're exposed to. It's like, they can't quite nail it, so they're like, oh, it's not our problem. It's like, well yeah, it is,
as soon as I like started that field placement with Hunter 7, I wanted to like research. I'm like, what the fuck happened with Agent Orange? What's so different and what, you learn from the past. And like the biggest difference that I found was that, and the biggest mistake that Vietnam veterans found in like the organizations that sprung from Vietnam veterans was that they tried to get the government for war crimes. And there were several legal teams that were like, don't do this because like, if they win, then you can never do anything with it again. And that's essentially like, that's pretty much why it didn't go as far as it probably could have, because like with anything you have to prove like intent. And with Agent Orange, they weren't able to prove that like the government wanted to cause like health issues and all
the intent. Right? Yeah.
There was this, what the fuck was it called? Scorched Earth. Can't remember the guy who wrote it, but he was a doctor who went and like researched like long-term effects. Essentially like what's happening in Fallujah right now already happened in Vietnam. Like generations of people like affected by the conflict, that happened. Like all of the munitions and stuff that we pumped into Fallujah like is going to affect like generations of children. And is, we're seeing it right now, but like, we've already seen it for generations in Vietnam because like all that shit, like, the defoliation and stuff, like it's in the soil, it's in the water. Like, and that's a long-term thing,
Yeah. So. That's well. Yeah. And like I said, it's wild to think about too. Cause you're just like, holy shit, and even those years too, you're like, this isn't good. Like you said, as an 18, 19-year-old, like this isn't, like, I know I'm a grunt, but this stuff, there's stuff that we're doing here. This is not good long term,
right.
even like I said, just the burn pit stuff we knew back then was like, this is not going to be good. Like you can't sit next to toxic fumes and inhale gas from a Humvee and, and sleep next to generators and think that it's going to be good for your health, And even like the shit farms and, even in like the bigger areas, it was, it's insane. But it's pretty cool. Like I said, that the Hunter 7 stuff, I'm glad they're, it is nice to see that because you're starting to see guys develop these aggressive cancers or develop these illnesses, and I feel like it's probably coming more and more to light, and like I said, the VA, everyone shits on the VA, but like the VA, we have the best VA in the whole world, man. I've been with a lot of veterans from other countries. It doesn't even exist in their country. There is no, like, they don't even have Purple Hearts, the UK does not have a Purple Heart. It doesn't. There's no getting shot or blown up when you lose a leg or something. Like there's no indicator of that, so let alone
Canadian guys get shit on. It's, I mean, they have a Veterans Affairs, but like, it's not good.
Yep.
And it's, you have to understand too, like not advocating for them, but like they, cause there's lots of shortcomings, but like they do the best with what they can. And it's the largest like centralized healthcare system in the world. Yeah. So what do you expect? They're bogged down.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And like I said, it's like, glad we have it. A lot of people are like, fuck the VA. Sure. They should have. Like, well, at least we have something. And it honestly, it's pretty good. It's gotten a lot better. Like even when I was in 2009, I got out in 2009 and the lady wanted to basically throw me out of the VA. Like it was like, I showed up to do my, this is, way back before this stuff they do now. I submitted my initial claims right after I got out. They're like, just no matter what happens, even if you want to like submit claims years down the road, but just make sure you do it right away. And then you're in the system. And they're like, so whenever you need to go back, instead of trying to like not do it and then go, a few of my buddies did that. They waited like 7 years before they finally, or whatever, or 5 or 6 or something. I did it like the month I got out. And, the lady was just like trying to kick me out of the damn VA. Like she was like, bend over, touch your toes, do this, do that. And I'm like, okay. Like, and she's like, all right, get out of here. And then they just denied everything. It was like, fuck you, get out, And I was like, oh, okay. But then I'd gone back years later and they had done third-party contractors, like contractors are working with you. Like they've really honed it in, on how they're doing stuff and treatments. And like, even with my stuff now, it's like, all right, cool. I can go to the VA and get healthcare if I need to. I can go and talk to the therapist if I need to, like the services are there. My buddies use them a lot more than I do. I know I should utilize them more, but even like hearing aids, like going to get here, I need hearing aids. So it's like, gotta go and get those,
like everyone I know has hearing aids now.
Yeah. I need some. My left ear's really jacked, but like I need to get them. I need them for like a year or two now, probably a little longer. But it's definitely something I need. But I just like procrastination. I just put it off. I'll go get them. And my wife's been on me forever. But she's like, you need to hear it. I was like, I know. All right, I'll go get them. Yeah.
Okay. But, all right.
Yeah. So, but no, I agree, man. And like I said, I think it's really cool seeing the Hunter 7 Foundation stuff really kind of popping off and seeing a lot of support at least behind that. And then on top of it, some of the guys that can't get support, so they do help. I think it is nice to see that they are covering bills, like, guys that have passed or guys that are going like that's a huge win. Cause otherwise, they're stuck with crazy amount of cancer bills and you're like fucking 38 years old.
There's so many. There's so many organizations out there, like for everything that the VA will fall short on. There's so many organizations out there like picking up the slack. That Semper Fi Fund does a ton with financial support. Tunnel of the Towers, pays off houses left and right. Many different.
And I didn't know even about the Tunnels of Towers. I knew for years, but I thought they were just like a racing foundation. Like, I thought it was just like I thought it was like a 5K, but they do a lot of shit. And I was like, oh wow, dude, I did not know that.
For real. Yeah. And Gary Sinise is just like a powerhouse of philanthropy. So there's so many, like I said, like for every area that the VA falls a little bit short, there's some nonprofit or charity picking up their slack and doing the work. So cool.
I think that's cool with our generation, and maybe it's because of the social media aspect too. Probably helps us a lot compared to like say the Vietnam generation. Getting the word out, the acceptance of, guys, it's like, even with our guys too, it's like, hey man, get your claim in, get to the VA, there's a lot of I can't imagine what the hard headedness was in Vietnam, of guys just like, fuck that, I'm not going to the VA, or I'm not doing it. It's astronomical. I mean, that's just a generational thing in general, whereas now in the GWAT, you get guys, but then, even as I've gotten older, I'm 37 now, I've told my buddies, just like, get your claims in, make sure you're good. Like, it's your benefits. Like, you did it. We serve, and these are guys that, multiple deployments, and it's like, just do it. Just get your stuff in, make sure it's just there, for when you're 75, it's there. Yeah. When you're 50 and your body's breaking down or something, it's going to be, or even now, like guys are getting cancer at 40, 35, like, get it on record, get it, what's happening, because like I said, if you wouldn't have done it, you probably, I hate to say it, you probably wouldn't have got the cancer, like you weren't sleeping next to gasoline. You weren't burning trash. You weren't having EW jammers next to your balls or next to your head for months on end. You weren't mefequine. Jesus Christ, mefequine, that they like redacted that shit. We knew that stuff back in 2008, like the mefequine, and they actually, within like a year, the DOD was like, yeah, we got rid of mefequine. Guys were having nightmares. Like our corpsman was like, take these. You could take, okay, first off, the practice was ridiculous. They're like, take doxycycline every day so you don't get fucking what is it? It's not pneumonia. Damn it, I can't remember what it was. It's something you could get from like mosquitoes and shit. What the hell you call it? Malaria. Malaria. Yeah. So they're like, hey, take it every day, and so you don't get malaria. And I'm like, first of all, I'm no fucking doctor, but I was like, if you take antibiotics every day, your immune system, your body gets a resistance to that antibiotic working. Yeah. I was like, so that's not a good idea. And then they go, well, okay, if you don't want to do that, you can take mefequine once a week, and that gives you nightmares, and and it has been known to do that. And this was like 2008. I'm like, okay, well, I don't want to do that one either. So then, luckily enough, we were on our own little sub team in Afghanistan. We're like, I'm not taking anything, and so they were like, yeah, that's fine. You don't have to take anything. So, but yeah, I think I took mefequine for like once or maybe 2-3 weeks, and I was like, yeah, I'm not doing this anymore. Like,
this sounds terrible.
Yeah. So it's kind of like even that piling up, and I think there was some mefequine, I don't know, like say lawsuits, but they're forcing guys to take it in other units that they knew it was actually bad at that point. Where it's all that kind of stuff, man. Like just getting stuff submitted and saying, hey, this is what we took, and maybe this has a correlation or something like that. But
I know my daughter's getting her regular whatever age required vaccines now, and and she's like, oh, and I'm like, yo, I got put against a wall and had 7 needles stuck in me. Now I'm giving her that that old guy bitter perspective. I'm like, it's just it could be worse for sure. I know that's not helpful, but still.
Yeah. I do remember getting the anthrax shot a bunch, and they would always lose our records. I'm sure you guys had too. They'd lose our records all the time. So they're like, oh, you don't have your shot. I was like, we know this isn't good. You just can't keep pumping us full of vaccines that are only 1-2 parters. This is 2007, 8, it's like, where's the fuck's our record, man? And they're like, I was like, I know I just did this. They're like, wow, just get it again. It's not that big a deal. It's like, yeah, it might be, so
the smallpox was the worst, I think.
That's what it was. I think it was smallpox. Yeah.
The actual, and I was terrified. And I remember going into the barracks the day we got it 4th of July weekend or something, and it was some I don't know, I think it was that weekend, and so they were no swimming, be careful drinking, no sex, I'm like, fuck is everyone gonna do? And then the first morning after everyone got the shot, they tell you not to touch it, right? Keep the Band-Aid on, don't touch it, don't uncover it. It's a live virus on your external body. And I walk into the barracks bathroom, and there's a dude washing it in the sink, and I just fucking turned around. I was like, we're all gonna die of something, for sure. This is the level of intelligence I'm dealing with.
Yeah. Oh yeah. That's how. Yeah. Barracks medicine. It's always the best.
Fuck.
Yeah. Barracks lawyers and barracks medicine. Yeah.
Yeah.
No. Yeah. So we can dive a little bit into. So what what got you into the Dead Reckoning Collective? How'd you and Tyler link up? You guys said that you were in the same unit back in Italy.
So not in the same unit. We had like a mutual friend. Tyler was in the 173rd. I was in that small detachment on the same base in Italy, which was like really small. I mean, the like Caserma Ederle. I think they've expanded a little bit. There's like another like satellite base, and there were a few like little satellite bases for like CTAF and stuff at the time. But Caserma Ederle is like the size of like 2 football fields. It's not big.
Yeah.
And like you have to, I'm pretty sure you have to like run like for a PT test, you have to run, if you're not running on the track, you have to run like the, circumference of the base like twice.
No shit.
To do a 2 mile. Yeah. It's like, it's not big. Maybe it was a 3 mile fucking, I don't remember. I don't know. It's a small base, whatever. And so he worked with a medic who was married to a lady in my unit. And so that's how he and I met. And then he got hurt. I was still there. Like his unit was gone. And I had a lot of friends in his unit. So when he came back for a little bit, we got to hang out, while he was healing up and doing his like warrior transition stuff. And then we just kept in touch, and he had started writing. I had always written. I think we always did on some level, but I just made it a little bit more known to him or whatever. So I was there for him like as an editor at times. And so when we connected on that level, that was just kind of how we like formed our friendship, in the beginning. And then, and it developed more over that. And so we started, DRC under another name, at first in like 2016, officially like DRC started in 2017. And we just saw like a need for, veterans, a place where veterans could tell their stories. Not necessarily like war stories, but just like there was a serious gap in the publishing industry for like veteran authors. Most we saw that like publishers wanted one thing, and it was like war stories. They wanted blood and guts, right? Yeah. They wanted to beef up the military nonfiction section. And so like, we didn't necessarily want to add to that. We wanted to add some better like memoirs. We wanted to definitely see like a solid like spot for poetry, and all these other things that we knew like our peers were capable of. So Tyler and I co-authored a book first, kind of to like fine tune the publishing process and just make sure we could do it. And it worked out pretty good. So that's where it started. We were like, oh, cool. Like we can do this. This is possible. And we've, now we're like 20 something books deep. So some by the same authors, and we've like been discovering new authors. Authors have discovered us, through other people's books, through different events that we've been able to do. And then we've been able to do like different like workshops and courses through our director of education, Jessica Danger, too. So been super cool.
Nice. That's awesome. Yeah. And then talk with Tyler, you guys are really kind of stepping on the gas this year. I remember him talking about like you guys are kind of trying to take it to the next level.
We try, man. Yeah.
So how's that process like? What's that like? Like, like I said, I remember I was talking with him, and it's just like, it's not easy running any business, especially when you're trying to start one up, or, you got something like you guys have a little bit, but he was like, hey, now it's do or die essentially at this point. You guys got that momentum. Now you got to hit the gas and go, what's that been like this year? Or like, how's that process been going?
There's a lot of pressure for sure. And also just not to like reinvent the wheel with what we've already done. I don't want anyone that we take on, to have their book like be white noise,
Mm-hmm.
So we need to make sure that everybody's like bringing something different to the table, which they always are, right? Everybody's experience is different and the way that they convey it is different. But like, if you're not careful, then you can just market it as like a whatever this book was, part two.
Mm-hmm.
And Luke's second book, his sequel to the first Marauder, is a great example of that. Like, it's a whole other world, he's put so much work into it. There are definitely people who are going to look at his second book as like, oh, the first Marauder too. But like Law of the Marauder, the second installment is going to be this like extraordinary event. And I know a lot of people are pumped because it's like this like cool, like post-apocalyptic novel with like militias and all kinds of shit. But, but it'll definitely be like more than a part two,
Yeah.
So.
That's awesome. So I mean, you said you guys are excited, kind of seeing where it's going, and
yeah.
Yeah.
And just trying different things too. We've got like our first Halloween release this year. And then just like some different poetry, some different poets, with different styles and different experiences. And so, yeah.
Yeah. So if you guys don't mind me asking, so what is that kind of like, every business has that level of success, or even like, media content, like you're getting so many subscribers, you're getting so many views. Like, how do you guys measure that? Like, said, you want to hit the gas. What are some of those milestones, I guess you would say? Like, I don't know anything about the publishing industry, other than like how many books you sell, like what is that looking like? Cause you guys are a publisher, so like, that's a world that's completely unknown to me. Something that started out as a publisher, what are those success blocks look like, or what is that those goals look like?
So we definitely seat of our pants a lot of shit, and we're constantly like learning as we go. But we do some shit differently in that like we don't depend entirely on Amazon. Amazon's great. We've seen how it can work for us, and also how it can like bite us. And so we definitely like push more toward our own website, where like if we are if we're doing a book release, we're doing like a multi-item release. So like you'll see like when we drop a book, we also drop like a t-shirt, and we'll have like a sticker that comes with the book, and you can buy like the book shirt combo and stuff like that. And we go through Mission Essential gear, which is like a family veteran-owned business in North Carolina, and they've been great to deal with. So they do all our distribution for books also. Like if you're not just buying the book off of Amazon, like you're buying the book through our website, then you're buying it, and they're like fulfilling the order through their shop, which is great. It's like they're wonderful to work with. And so, yeah, I mean, like those big pre-order pushes are awesome. They don't do as much for like the Amazon ratings and stuff like that. But like we get reviews in other ways. People review on Goodreads, and they can review on Amazon later, even if they don't purchase from there. And like doing the pre-orders that way and having those like exclusive items makes it like a little bit more special,
Yeah.
It's fun too. Like being able to like create like something on top of the book is super fun.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Like you said, the book aspect, like I said, I love reading books, but the aspect of like the publishing and the business side of the house, like where, you have the old school publishers that's been around for a while, and some of them are died off. So it's like firing up one, in the new era, it's just like everything else. They're like, oh, you're crazy if you do it. It's like, well, there's a need for it, but we're, finding that footing, in any industry, let alone publishing, it's going to be difficult, in some aspect, building that foundation up. So that's awesome, man. That's great. So you guys have any releases coming up here that you could somewhat announce, or like I said, you got an October one coming out?
Yeah, we have. So we've got one from David Rose coming out about Fallujah. And we have a couple poetry books coming out. Cora Reichert and Lonnie Hankins are two of our newer female poets. and Steve Callahan also is another one of the poetry releases. I'm gonna have to like actually reference the fucking calendar, man. But yeah, no, I mean, and like so many cool, just different things. The October release you were asking about is Nick Orton. Tales from the Crypt. So we haven't done until I talked to him. I hadn't really thought about it, but we haven't done like an actual Halloween release. So he'll be our first like actual Halloween release.
I'm excited. So is that volume 3 or is it like his own?
I think that'll be his third volume, his first with us. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
So,
yeah. Now I'm big.
Cool.
Big fan.
He's doing some really, really cool stories and stuff. And the short stories are fun. That's the cool thing that we've seen with the response to poetry too, is that like we're able to like kind of like get guys into poetry that like wouldn't have been into poetry otherwise, because it's, about like common subject matter. And the way that I always pitch it, like, short stories and poetry are like things that I read when I don't have a lot of time, which like I think describes a lot of us. So if you can't focus fully on like, a large body of work, it's cool to be able to read like 2 poems and then go to bed. Instead of like fucking around on your phone, which like we all know like isn't the best use of time before you go to sleep.
Exactly.
And so like poetry and short stories and things like that are like really good, I've found, for like, winding down and not having to be fully engaged in like a big book,
Yep. No, I'm with you. That's I have Tales from the Good Square, and we're excited too because we'll be making that a series, actual animation series here next year. So I'm stoked about that. So Nick's a blast. I actually try to get him back on the podcast again for a second time, but yeah, he's fun. But I've been in touch with him. But yeah, he had mentioned he was working with you guys, so I was like, hell yeah, I got to bring that up.
He was doing great on his own. So it's always like a compliment to us, like that, people who are like able to do all that stuff, they're like, oh, I'd like to take it to the next level, and like we're that next level for them. It's always nice to hear.
Hell yeah, so, that's awesome.
It's super cool to work with him.
Yeah, it's dope. Awesome, man. Well, I appreciate it for coming on today. So where can people find you? What's your, the contact, or even if they're like, hey, I want to get published through, Dead Reckoning Collective, what's your socials? Where can people get a hold of you?
Yeah, so the website is deadreckoningco.com. And if you go to the FAQ section, all of the submission criteria is on there. And then if you go to the store, that we actually have, like, we're starting to like set up storefronts for each individual book, so that you like everything's right in front with like the shirts and the books and whatever for each book, so you don't have to like sift through everything. But then like we're most active on Instagram, which is just Dead Reckoning Collective, and then we put out a lot through our email list as well. So yeah, if you hit us up on Instagram or via email, we'll get back to you. But otherwise, just look over the submission criteria on the FAQ before you drop your manuscript.
Sounds good. And where can people find you?
I'm at I don't push my personal social media. It's Keith Walter Dow. I'll probably just leave you in the requests for the rest of your life. But
sounds good. All right, bro. Well, thanks for coming on.
All right. Take care, buddy.